Дорогие, я не знаю, как вас назвать, там, телезрители или там благозрители, как угодно, в общем, интернетчики. Сегодня у нас вот в нашей такой импровизированной студии на Орде присутствует Брюс Стерлинг со своей супругой Ясминой. И у нас будет сегодня прекрасная возможность позадавать вопросы, пообщаться. Вот. Также в студии присутствует молодой казахстанский поэт Ануар Дюсембинов, который будет от вашего имени задавать вопросы, может быть, как-то помогать нам вести дискуссию. Ануар будет задавать эти вопросы, а я их буду переводить Брюсу, и будем общаться. Попробуем?
Попробуем.
Попробуем. Давай, Ануар.
Ну, мне хотелось бы сразу спросить такой вопрос стандартный, который я задаю почти всем людям, которые что-то делают, пишут в плане творчества. Вот как он относится к тому, что он делает? Это то, что он делает сам в большей степени, или в большей степени то, что к нему приходит, и он исполняет роль только такого ретранслятора? И то есть его творчество состоит только в том, как именно он это как бы спроецирует, или все-таки он считает, что это вот прямо такой действительно труд именно его одного?
That question is really a question, and here's why. Basically, Anwar is asking you a question whether you think that your writings and your creative output is done in a manner where you actually give the world what is it that you are actually thinking, or whether you act more as a retranslator of someone, something else, and your contribution to the world is really in that retranslation of things. So this is a question that he asks everybody that he speaks to.
Well, you know, as a couple, I think we've got both of those handled, because Yasmina's blog is very much one of those personal witness blogs, which is about her experience of the world, whereas my blog is mostly a weblog. It's a log of the things that I see on the web that I think are of interest to people. So she has the sort of personal and immediate approach, and I'm more of a curator and compiler.
Получается, что у нас есть комбинация и того, и другого, потому что и Жасмина, и Брюс, они ведут свои блоги, но у Жасмины блог такой, что она отдает свою интерпретацию событий и больше представляется в виде, можно сказать, свидетеля событий. А в то время как Брюс, наоборот, больше ведет свой блог как некий, скажем так, куратор и просто передает то, что вот он видит в интернете, он это дальше передает.
Ну, я имел в виду в плане написания книг, там, творчества.
And the question was more towards the creative output in terms of writing, creative writing, not just the blogging, but also the.
То есть чувствует ли он полную ответственность того, что он пишет на себе, или все-таки это что-то приходящее?
This question is also to do with the sort of responsibility for things we do in life, and Anwar is asking whether you feel responsible for what you are producing yourselves, or whether you feel that it is actually somebody else's ideas and so on that get the sort of magnification or.
Okay, I'll tackle that. As he said, since I'm a woman, a feminist blogger, and a writer, you know, it's complicated. And since I would love to live a little bit better and write a little bit less, because I always wrote in order to say something, to be an activist, you know. So I started writing. I always hate this word, I'm a writer or I'm a blogger or anything. I'm just a woman who writes sometimes because I have to say something. So why is it always in my name in the first place, and why do I do a personal blog? Because unfortunately, I lived in the countries of war, you know, and somebody had to say it, and somebody should have taken the responsibility. Our politicians didn't do it. You know, our people were afraid of the politicians, of the wars, of the represalia, of everything that would have repression, you know. So activists had to do it, you know. And this is how I started blogging, and this is how I became famous, you know. This is how my books were published. I published before also, you know, but I was writing different stuff. And after that, I never came back to this other kind of literature because I don't want to come back. So now I'm not speaking about myself. I'm just saying that this is how it started because I was the first war blogger in the world, you know, before the word blogger was even existed, you know. And I did it because of the sense of responsibility. Nowadays we have so many bloggers, so many writers who do just as I did, you know. And they're much younger and they do poetry, they do blogging, they do fiction, they do science fiction, they do whatever. I think the genre does not exist anymore. And what I think is very important that with this kind of internet communication, which is often anonymous, mine was, for example, anonymous, you know, because they were protecting me from the police, you know, and afterwards I got a name to it, you know. We broke this ivory tower of writers with a big W, capital letter, writers who sit there and know everything the best in the world and they're not in contact with what's really going on the ground. And very often they can be very good writers, you know, but they don't have the courage or the talent to express what's really going on at that time. They're living somewhere else in this protected field called literature, and I'm really glad that the new literature is nowadays on the internet, you know. That's how I feel about literature.
Just thank you for this contribution. And Bruce, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I'm very ambivalent about the topic of what you can do with blogs. And what concerns me is sort of how much control the writer has over the word. And if you're writing something with a pencil for your own use, kind of as a diarist, that's kind of the state zero of writing. You're just trying to clarify your own thoughts for an audience of one. But blogs are very technically mutable. And I've been blogging for quite a while. And I've never found anyone, including myself, who I think ever mastered it as a medium. I mean, really understood what a blog was, understood who was reading it, you know, what its purpose was, what was the best way to arrange it, because the software is always being updated, new communities are always coming online. I mean, when I first began blogging, I knew that most people who were reading it were young men with computers, because I was a young man with computers, and they're there. But now I know that many of the people who are reading my blog are Brazilians, Indians, Chinese, they might be Kazakhs even. There weren't any Kazakhs reading it. So now I'm like sitting there reading my blog. You know, well, yeah. You know, after hanging out with people at like horde.kz, I'm going to have to think, well, what do they think about it? You know, I mean, what can I say to help them? You know, and so this is like it's a new layer of my concerns as a writer. And, you know, not only that, but as bandwidth has improved, I find myself doing things like linking to videos of my speeches, which I never used to do. I mean, I speak a lot, but now there's like this YouTube archive of me, you know, with this sort of a new kind of internet video. You know, and those speeches are really very personal, and, you know, they're really in a very kind of public figure space of somebody making a considered kind of personal remark, because you're actually seeing the person, he's saying it with his own voice, he's using his own hands, there's something very human and immediate about it, whereas a weblog is more like link to this, link to that, comment on this, comment on that. So, you know, the fact that there's now speeches on my weblog has changed the weblog a lot, and I really don't know what to make of it. I really feel like it's like being a car mechanic and having somebody tell you, fix a car. Okay, here's some dynamite, and here's like a big hammer, and here's like a saw and some dental tools. So you're like, okay, I'll use the dental tools, and you know, but then like a week goes by, and then somebody shows up and says, wait, forget the saw. I've got a drill now. I have a drill, and like here's some other things, and they're like big, you know. So you're like, I mean, even if you're a really good car mechanic, you can go talk to the other car mechanics. You know, you go talk to other bloggers. There are very few bloggers left to do the kind of blogging I do, which is, you know, things that I see on the web that I think of interest. Things that are like really effective blogs. The most effective blogs, in my opinion, are industry booster blogs. Things like Giga Ohm. You got this guy Ohm Malik. He's a venture capitalist. He goes out, he hangs out with people in the venture capital field. Instead of says, talk to me about your startup. Well, we're trying to do this. Okay, why don't you talk to these venture capital guys over here? And oh, by the way, here's a place to get a job on this side of the blog. And now we're going to compare your startup to this other startup here in London. Okay, this is a guy who's creating an industry, right? He's like a power broker and a financier. He's not a journalist. And certainly he's not making sort of personal statements. It's not that I'm Om Malik and this is what I feel in my heart.
He's changing the world.
He's not a poet.
Yeah.
He's an industry booster.
Yeah.
He's like a guy running the oil and gas journal and talking to people in the petroleum business.
Bruce, just a small comment. We just had this small discussion on the Kazakh poets, thinking about the newest trends in philosophy
Right.
of the world. And it just so happens, in my humble opinion, that you perhaps have greatly influenced the future Kazakh poetry, because you've pointed the Kazakh poets into the direction of the, what do you call that movement?
The speculative realists.
Yeah, the speculative realists. So if you see some Kazakh poetry coming with that in mind, that will be your doing. So you have to feel responsible. I'm not trying to put any pressure on you. I'm just kind of teasing you.
Well,
I often the world is so interconnected that it's you say a word here on your blog and somebody picks it up and God knows what they will do out of it.
Right. Well, I've had people say that in the past. It's like, oh, Bruce Sterling said something about us, and then we got a lot of business or whatever. But if you're a Kazakh poet and you're hanging out with the speculative realists, I mean, maybe you'll find some great commonality there, because the speculative realists are kind of famous for being the first philosophical movement to arise on the internet. They don't really do conventional publishing. They really sort of run philosophy blogs. But you could have found them with a search engine quite easily. And search engines are not moral actors. You wouldn't say, "Oh, thank you so much, Google." Google KZ, or okay, they're just machines, right? They just sort things. They're sort of collective intelligence. So, I really think I probably connect a lot of people to other people who don't even know who I am. They find my blog on a search engine, and they find some article, and they don't care to know who I am. It's just like, oh, look, here's some links, and then they're gone in 30 seconds, or, So, in that way, I'm doing some kind of social service, but it's a very different kind than the kind where, say, I'm a university professor, and I say, let me tell you about philosophy, young poet, because that's just a different sort of social relationship.
But the problem with professors now at university, which I heard which are both in this discussion, was that the students know more than the professors sometimes. Not that they know really more, but students come with a bibliography which the professors do not know. So the professors often ask the students, please, will you tell me before I give an exam to you which books you read? It's the opposite, because they read from internet.
We have a question from the Twitter.
Oh, good.
Oh.
Hi.
Брюс,
Hey, we're on Twitter. I'm Bruce S. on Twitter.
Да, Must X1 Дмитрий Зимин задает вопрос. Брюс, вы и Ридли Скотт во многом определили эстетику современной фантастики. Сколько еще времени нужно для ее претворения в жизнь?
Претворить ничего.
Видимо, вот этих образов, которые они создают, я так понимаю.
So, this is the guy...
эстетику современной фантастики. Определили, говорит, эстетику.
Dmitry Zimin, who's a good friend of mine, actually, and also a blogger. He's one of the people behind the very first social network of Kazakhstan. And he's actually behind the Horde KZ as well. He's the guy, the nerd.
He's Mr. Horde.
Yes, exactly.
He's the Khan.
Yeah.
He's the Khan of the Golden Horde.
Dmitry is saying that you and Gibson have been behind the...
Ридли Скотт.
Sorry?
Ридли Скотт.
Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott?
Так написано.
Oh, Ridley Scott, the
Yeah.
director.
Yeah.
Okay.
That you both were behind the sort of the new aesthetics of science. And his question is really, kind of philosophical and also futurologist as well. He says, well, how long do you think will it take for those kind of images and these aesthetics to take place firmly in our society and become the reality, instead of being science fiction?
Well, I would say that that's not an absolute. It's more of a slider bar. That you can go around now and see that there are obviously architects who've been influenced by the movie Blade Runner, because they're young architects, and they were 15 when the Blade Runner movie appeared, and now they think, wow, why can't it be like Blade Runner with the sort of, okay, that's never going to be all over the world all at once. It's an aesthetic that's going to have a limited appeal, and it will also become dated. So there are going to be areas where it's quite intense, where you show up and say certain parts of Tokyo and say, look at all this neon, it's just like Blade Runner. But then you can walk a few blocks other in Tokyo and find like an old Shinto shrine. Okay, they're never going to turn the old Shinto shrine into the Blade Runner Shinto shrine, okay? That's just not going to happen. Forget it, Don't hold your breath, right? Because it just wouldn't occur to people to do it. There's not even resistance. It doesn't even. They wouldn't even think of it.
Are you saying that not everything in the sci-fi will become reality? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying simple-minded to think that the world is ever going to become uniform in that way. It just doesn't, And your own interest in things, you would be bored if everything in the world looked like Blade Runner. I mean, imagine if you got up in the morning and your wife was dressed as the woman from Blade Runner, and the breakfast plates were all Blade Runner, and the table was Blade Runner, and then you went out in the car, it was Blade Runner, and your work was Blade Runner. You would immediately say, I don't want this, let's go, buy a yurt and go out in the steppe, and get some goats, it's like, this is driving me crazy. Okay, if you yourself can't stand it, how is the whole world supposed to do it?
Thinking about the electric sheep,
Well, it's just not reasonable to ask, and it's even if it happened, you wouldn't want it. So why expect it?
Good. Another question?
Меня интересовало, я думаю, наверняка у всех писателей есть какие-то свои комфортные условия в каких-то мелочах, которые удобны для того, чтобы творить, да, то есть, может быть, у него на компьютере какая-то есть вдохновляющая надпись, или какая-то привычная, не знаю, не фетиш, а...
понятно,
да.
Что-то такое, что вызывает вдохновение.
Наверное. Да? Какой-то якорь такой,
за
которым...
Anwar's question is to do with inspiration, and he's really interested if you have some artifact, or perhaps maybe, I don't know, an icon on your desktop or something like that, something that helps you be creative, maybe a warm chair, or, I don't know, what is it that makes you tick, in creative ways?
Right. Well, I'm a great believer in that because I do teach design. Sometimes I'm a design professor. So I'm very, very interested in physical objects and kind of their social implications and the messages that they carry, the semiotics of objects. So I would say that although it doesn't really help me write fiction, the objects that inspire me the most and sort of open my mind the most are multi-tools. Like a Swiss Army knife and a Leatherman tool, right? Because it's like having a set of material keys. Right, so you've got the scissors, the knife, the screwdriver, the little saw, the pliers. Okay, if those are on your body all the time, then when you're walking around in the room and you see sort of that needs a set of pliers, you just go fix it. Right?
Do you hang one?
No, I can't take them on aircraft.
Yeah, but otherwise you would?
I have them everywhere I go.
Like Leatherman too?
Oh yeah.
Nice.
I've got lots. And Cory Doctorow has huge numbers. He's a science fiction writer. He collects them.
I
So
love
he's got 60 or 70. Well, if you carry them habitually, it opens up your mind because you just see reality in a different way because you can intervene. So that's a very science fictional writer way to think.
And
right?
also very Homo sapiens sapiens way of thinking.
Well, that too, yeah.
Let's change the world around us.
Let's just tinker with our hands. It just makes you immediate. But it's also more
This is so much with the behavioristical kind of science, where the young kid takes something and plays
Right.
with it, and that makes his brain, you know.
Well,
expand.
speaking of philosophy, it's like philosophy in the body. You know? And a lot of people believe that human learning is body-centric and shouldn't be too much related to the brain.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, although I'm not very good with my hands, the fact that I have these things that I can do with my hands makes my world more tactile. So, you know, I just have a different relationship to material reality. And of course, I always carry this camera. So, you know, those of you out there in Flickr and Blogland, you can go onto my Flickr set.
That was a little product
Which
placement
is
there.
Bruce S. Flickr. Well, yeah, I'll just take a picture over here. Bruce S. Flickr has like 6,000 photos in there, which is basically my travels.
Nice.
And you know, I just when I see something of interest, I just take a picture, and I find that it helps me as a writer, because then I start to look, because I know I have a camera, so I'm like, let's just really look. You know, you notice when you took me up to the top of this building, I walked across the entire perimeter, just documenting everything that I saw. That'll all go onto the internet. And you know, if I ever need to write about Astana, I'll go back to these pictures that I took and say, oh yes, he was at the pyramid, and it was next to the building that was shaped like a cigarette lighter.
What do you think about our architecture? I mean, you said on the way here that
Yeah.
you're fond of Norman Foster design.
Yeah, he's sort of my favorite star architect. I like Rem Koolhaas quite a lot too, actually.
We should probably look into that, because I think that it's very important that Astana has different architects present here, you know, with their works.
You know, I could argue it either way. I mean, there's some cities you go to, like Jaipur in India, where everything's very uniform, and the effect on your mind is stunning. You know, it's like the coloration is sort of, you know, I mean, it's like an overwhelmingly beautiful city because everything is thought through from the same point of view. And then there are other places that are just much more jumbled, where you go there and you feel in a different way. It's like, anything's possible. I can go anywhere and do anything. Okay. You know, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't.
Well,
I can tell you that a seat of government is never going to be as lively as a vast commercial center.
Of course.
So, you know, this city is a seat of government, and it's going to behave in the way that bureaucrats want things to behave. Rules, regulations, things meeting at nice angles. You know, it's a bit like Brussels or Brasilia or, you know, Austin, which is where I'm from.
Austin, Texas.
Yes, Austin, Texas. It's the seat of government, and also has very rectilinear streets and
Yeah.
quite a lot of prestige government buildings. I used to work in one, the Texas State Capitol.
And Stevie Ray Vaughan is also
Yes,
from Austin.
Stevie's from Austin.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, we're not Houston. We're just not as big. I mean, Houston's the 4th largest city in the U.S.
Yeah. I think that I'm not sure whether you've heard about this, but Astana is actually bidding to host the Expo 2017.
Yeah.
With the theme being future energy, or energy of the future.
Right.
So focusing on renewables and so on, future technologies. Because as you could see, you know, we're a continental country, so quite cold in winter and very warm or very hot in summer. So it's all about energy, and we're, I should say, super rich in terms of uranium, coal, oil and gas, and so on and so forth. But still, we're very mindful of environment, and because of our St. test ground legacy, you know,
Right.
so 400 odd
Well, you know,
explosions.
it's not really a question of whether you can get people to come. You know,
Yeah,
if a city hosts a big event, what you want to think about is like, what will this do for us over a 5 to 10 year period?
Yep.
Not like, you know, what will we look back on it and be happy about it? You know, there are areas that have hosted the Olympics where people have managed to really change the city. Turin, certainly, it had a renaissance when it hosted the Olympics. People just like got up, and you know, the city looks a lot different. Barcelona built a lot of interesting buildings. They hosted the Olympics. But then Sarajevo was trying to host the Olympics as well, okay? That didn't work out so well, you know? And there are other places where, you know, people have tried to grasp too much and have had like humiliating failures because they didn't sort of think it through and didn't like manage to like consider the long-term implications.
I wanted to ask you a question as the professor of design. You know, some of the landmark buildings in this world, like the Eiffel Tower, or the result of these huge exhibitions.
Right.
So we're thinking right now that if we are to host that Expo 2017, we definitely need to come up with some landmark building.
Right.
And since you are this sci-fi writer,
Yeah.
and the professor of design,
Yes.
and you've got the friends.
And I wrote an essay about the Eiffel Tower once.
Ah, good. So
Well,
you're the right
I
person.
wrote it from the Jules Verne restaurant in the Eiffel Tower, which is the restaurant named after a science fiction writer.
True.
It's in the Eiffel Tower.
True. So
I had the duck.
Was it good?
It was
I'm
good.
sure it was documented.
I
with your
had the
camera,
duck.
right?
Well, I wrote about it for a magazine. Yeah, I did document the duck. I had the duck. Yeah, we had silver Christoffel forks and some very
У нас
nice
есть еще один
crystal
вопрос.
wine glasses in the Jules Verne restaurant. Yeah.
So
Okay, I would point out to you, historically speaking, that when the Eiffel Tower was first built,
They
it was
hated it.
hated.
It was
It
hated.
was hated. It took 20 years
Yep.
for it to become a beloved object.
Who was it out of classics who said that the only place there where he doesn't see the Eiffel Tower is the Eiffel Tower, therefore he
So
goes
he goes
there so that it doesn't spoil the
That's
view.
probably
of Paris.
Théophile Gautier. No, I think he was dead by then. Had to be some other later guy. That sounds like a very Gautier-style remark. But you know, the intelligentsia really hated it. And there was a movement about 15 years into its life to tear it down.
Yeah.
People are like, look, the party's over.
But that's
Let's get us to finally get rid of this eyesore, you know, rip it down.
We're thinking we should build something not similar in the shape or
Right.
design, but,
Yeah.
but some a landmark
Uh-huh.
building
So
that
that
would
everybody
yeah.
hates.
Okay, well,
No, something that would become the sort of quote unquote.
all right. Well,
national symbol.
let me tell you the
What should
dark.
it be like?
Let me tell you the dark secret of the Eiffel Tower.
Oh, the dark secret of the Eiffel
The
Tower.
real reason it was never torn down is that radio was invented,
Uh-huh.
and it immediately became a radio broadcast tower.
So we should do
But,
the
but,
Wi-Fi
but,
thing.
but
or what?
Eiffel did not know that radio would be
Uh.
invented by Marconi much later.
Yep.
It was just that once there was actually this use for the thing, then it was immediately became a gigantic communication center
Yep.
right in the center of Paris, and you know, and it's super valuable real estate for cell phone companies and all the rest of these things. So nobody would tear it down. But the truly dark secret is that the top of the Eiffel Tower has a radio espionage nest in it, where the French military has been practicing military espionage on, you know, electronic spying on a huge landmass of Europe ever since radios were first invented.
Nice.
So there's an intelligence application for the Eiffel Tower, and it will never be torn down for those reasons, the commercial rental reason and also
Yeah.
the intelligence reason.
So
But
what-
that could not be figured out from the beginning. I mean, the one thing that was good about it is that you can sort of tie things onto the Eiffel Tower. So, and people don't notice. So it's fairly easy to reformat it for future purposes. And because if it was, I mean, imagine if the Eiffel Tower was just like a spire of black glass
Uh-huh.
and it was slippery and nothing could be attached to
Uh-huh.
it.
Uh-huh.
If that was the case, if you couldn't change it, it probably would have been demolished.
Ah. So that tells us that we should do something that can have different uses to
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Is that the
You,
case?
you want to build in some adaptability.
Uh-huh.
You're going to want this thing to be able to learn,
Mm.
you know? And you want to specifically build it for purposes that you don't understand at all. Not like, oh, we're going to build it and also there will be some apartments for rich people, you know?
No,
Because
no.
the rich people might become unpopular and then they tear it down because they hated them.
Yeah.
You want to like build in like some area of like, you
But
do.
which architects would do the best job, do you think?
For a prestige construction,
Yeah,
I would hire an engineer.
engineer.
Yeah, because Eiffel was not an architect.
Uh-huh.
He was an engineer. He was sort of an architect, but he was a builder of bridges.
Yeah.
So the Eiffel Tower is basically a bridge that goes straight up. It's a
Uh-huh.
railway bridge that just goes into the sky.
Interesting. How
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah. You know, and that's why it looks as weird as it does. It's not a beautiful building. It's just a railway bridge that goes due up. That's like shows the potential that iron can do.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you wanted to do something, I would find an engineer who's doing some kind of material processing that nobody's ever built anything out of, like, say, fabricated nanocarbon or something like that, just some kind of...
Nanocarbon.
Well, yeah, just something weird, something that was as unusual for us as like a wrought steel.
Computer generated.
Yeah, computer generated, sort of piled on, there's a lot of new materials around now. So kind of, metal, glass.
So Bruce Stерлing comes to Astana
Maybe
and
virtual.
Just saying, if you wanted to replicate the Eiffel Tower, you wouldn't want to build a big iron thing.
Yeah.
Because when he built the big iron thing, nobody had ever seen one. And not only that, it was twice as tall as any other building on the planet at the time. Not just 100 meters more tall, twice as tall as the Washington Monument, which was the biggest, prestige spire in the world.
So it's
at
not
that
about
time.
being the tallest building in the world or something like that. It should be just kind of the newest thinking behind it.
Well, it depends on what you want out of the thing. If you're building a fair and you want people to come see a bunch of things at the fair, lasers.
Lasers.
Yeah, light show. Because it goes up and it's like huge and you can see it from space and it doesn't cost very much and it's like super big and then you just fold it and it all goes away.
This is great stuff, really. If you understand what Bruce is talking about, this is really great stuff.
And I know the guy you want, Raphael Lozano Hemmer.
This is what I wanted to hear.
World's
And
greatest.
now we are on to the next question.
Telephone number.
You want a laser, you follow him on Twitter, Raphael Lozano Hemmer. He's like Mr. Urban Laser.
Excellent. Excellent.
Super guy, he can make your town unbelievable.
Because laser is also
He's
about
tweeting
energy.
already.
Yeah, well, lasers are about energy, right?
Yeah.
But, if you want something that, like, people come to look at 100 years from today, like they do to the Eiffel Tower,
Yeah.
okay, there's got to be some reason for them to do that.
Yeah.
They want to go up to the top. There's certain rituals associated with it,
Yep.
Okay, that's just a different kind of prestige construction.
Interesting.
If you want something that goes away in a hurry, you want to do something immaterial.
Another question, please.
Еще один вопрос из Твиттера. Во-первых, наши твиттеряне не могут почему-то зафоловить Брюса, потому что они его нашли, но у него закрытый аккаунт. Они спрашивают, почему. Во-вторых, с момента последней книги прошло уже довольно много времени, когда следует ждать следующую и о чем она будет.
So first of all, the Twitter account holders from Kazakhstan do not seem to be able to start following you because you
have a closed account.
Closed account, yeah.
Oh.
So they're asking why, and the second question is to do with your last book, and everybody's wondering when the new one is going to be out and what is it going to be about.
Right. Okay. Well, the first question. There are a lot of reasons to have a closed Twitter account. But the number one reason was that I found out that bots were following me on Twitter and then going and blog spamming the blogs that I linked to in my account. Because, my Twitter account is mostly a link account. I just link to other things. Look at this, look at this, look at this, look at this. Okay, now if robots are going to follow me and attack the things that I'm recommending, that's unethical.
Yeah, that's not nice.
I don't want to bring people harm by linking to them. So by shutting off the ability of the robots to go in and look through my account, I actually defeat that purpose. The second reason is I was being followed by lots of robots who just, want to follow what I'm doing. But the fact that I have to look at every single person who enters my account makes me more aware of what I'm doing. Am I going to talk to this person? Do I want him to know? What is he? He's a search engine optimization guy. No, you can't follow me. No. Just no. And there are many people, maybe about 10%, who might just say no.
Yeah. So this is like paparazzi, the modern era.
It's like not just no, but hell no. Get lost. And I appreciate that sense of power, and I also appreciate that it makes me mindful of what I'm saying.
При этом у него 17 тысяч где-то фолловеров, то есть он каждого отбирал так.
And what I was saying that still you have about 17,000.
It's not a matter of privacy. It's a matter of ethics and doing harm to other people. I mean, people aren't aware of who's looking at Twitter streams. How many intelligence services just cone them as a matter of whatever. I don't want those 17,000 people to be exposed to other people. The operatives from the state of whatever, or some private firm. you know,
Yeah.
who might want to sell them to somebody else. Why am I making that data available to people whom I don't know and whose motives I have no reason to trust? You know, I mean, I'm somebody who's been writing about cyber crimes since I wrote Hacker Crackdown a long time ago. I'm very aware of, you know, how much sinister activity there is on the internet. There's a lot. Okay, now the question of books. I happen to have a new book coming out next month. It's a new collection of my short stories.
Woohoo!
It's called-
Short stories rule.
It's called Gothic High Tech.
Gothic high tech.
Gothic High Tech. It's my new
Who is doing
collection
the
of short
translation into
stories.
Russian?
I haven't sold it. in
Готический
Russia.
хай-тек.
Give it a try. You know, you might want to look that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a short story collection. So
Excellent.
it's got the stories I've written over like the past 6 or 7 years.
Perfecto. You know, I love short stories.
I think it's a pretty good collection. I would say it's one of my better collections.
I actually prefer short stories to huge novels, but some people do the other way around. You know,
Most.
most people, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
commercially speaking.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
you know, I feel the same way about it. I think science fiction is better in short form than the longer
Yeah.
books.
It's just the power of the message, you know, it's just...
Yeah, that's what Stanislav Lem
Yep.
used to call the spearhead of cognition. I mean, there's certain things, ideas where you just want to make your point and stop. You don't really need to
Yeah.
come up with some long narrative that the boy kisses the girl. You know.
Do you like O. Henry, who's not really a science fiction writer?
Well, you know, I'm not really that fond of this kind of joke style story, this sort of like very clever, small
So
scale.
Roald Dahl either?
I like Rudyard Kipling's short stories quite a lot. I think, and Robert Louis Stevenson's short stories I think highly of. And I like Borges quite a lot.
Ito,
Borges.
Calvino.
And I like Calvino. I'm a huge fan of
Yeah.
Calvino.
I love Borges. Borges is
Yeah,
great.
well, you know, these are guys who are writing in short form. And
Yeah.
Thinking.
I
in
like
short.
Lem. You know, I like Lem's short stories.
Mhm.
You know, the book that's all fantasy book introductions and the book that's all fantasy
Yes,
afterwards.
yes.
Those are quite interesting to me.
Yeah. Another question, if I may, and this will probably be the last question for today because we have to go to Piano Mania. We take piano music and classical music and all kinds of music.
Mm.
And the concert starts,
Boy,
actually, it
Time
starts,
is flying when you're
Yeah.
having fun. Yeah.
it starts in half an hour, so we
We gotta go.
we gotta go. But the question is to do with cyberpunk as the kind of niche in the science fiction. And do you see? I mean, obviously, there will be new styles in which science fiction develops itself. Do you see anything happening now? I mean, what is? I mean, you see all this Hugo Awards being given out to this guy or that guy
Yeah.
or this guy or that guy.
Right.
But do you see a movement? Because when you guys were out there, it was a movement. It was the
Yeah.
what was the name of the magazine? The Truth. The
Or Cheap Truth.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Cheap Truth. Yes. You know, you have this sense of the there were 6, 7 guys,
Right.
and they would do it same thing from different angles. You know,
Yeah.
tackling different aspects and so on and so forth. And the reason I'm asking you about this is for us as Kazakh poets, it's also very important. We are looking for new things, you know, because we want to be out there at the cutting edge, and science fiction and philosophy, for that matter, is very important
Right.
for us. So, where do you think the science fiction of the future will develop to?
Well, you know, this is a very difficult question
I
to
know,
answer.
and hence,
And you know, and I'm afraid my attitude toward it is not optimistic in the way you would think.
okay,
I mean, in some ways, it's quite optimistic because I see activity like, Lauren Bucas in Cape Town, South Africa, who's a young woman, you know, half my age really, who's a new writer, and she's coming from a country where nobody expects science fiction to come from, where suddenly science fiction is really flourishing. You got this sort of South African cinema fiction, and you know, and Lauren is obviously a cyberpunk writer, and everybody in the cyberpunk movement, although we never knew her personally, as soon as we like started reading her books and started hearing from her, we immediately knew
she's
she was,
one of
yeah,
us.
she's one of us. So she's like our kid sister, and you know, we're all like good pals with her, and you know, Pat Cadigan is like her great friend, and so forth and so on. So, you know, in that sense, it's like really interesting and unusual to have a literary movement where new people join it who are much younger than older people, and it's sort of like really getting it, but in a new and refreshing context, because she only writes about South Africa. She doesn't write about Japan like us cyberpunks of the 80s used to write. And there are some cyberpunk writers in Sao Paulo who I kind of like. And they write what they call Tupini punk, which is kind of cyberpunk with Brazilian characteristics. But, you know, they're Brazilian, and they're just like doing their Brazilian thing, and they like read a lot of cyberpunk, and they're like, we're not very cyber here, but, you know, we like do our own thing and kind of adapt it. And, you know, they've kind of found some interest in their society, and that seems to make some kind of difference to them. And, you know, so that's kind of charming. But the means of production and information that existed 30 years ago when we were cyberpunks are really gone. Because Cheap Truth was a Xerox document distributed through the mail. Nobody does that. We had an epistolary relationship of sending letters to one another, like letters, newspaper clippings, faxes. Nobody does that. There isn't any reason to do it. It's, you know, it's an incredibly limited way for writers to communicate, but it's also very, very writerly. Because you really have to think about it in order to like send these messages.
Yes.
And nobody's going to think about messages that way anymore. It's almost impossible to do.
But
So it's just
Bruce,
gone.
You are not answering my question, because you're saying you're talking about cyberpunk and being developed
Right.
get further. But I'm
Yeah.
saying about the science fiction of the future.
Yeah.
You know, 50 years from now, 100
Well, you know,
years from now.
I really think science fiction is quite likely to disintegrate.
Really?
Into aspects of speculative culture. You're going to find people who are speculative thinkers and writers. You say you're poets and you want to be next to philosophers. My suggestion
We
would
want to
be
be ahead of them.
you're actually going to be philosophers. Or you're going to be people who are communicating, who write a poetry which is sort of like poetry, but also sort of mixed with these other things,
On the
tech
iPhone.
development,
On the
blogging, philosophy, and it's on the iPhone and so forth. I don't think you're going to be able to get away from that. And I think that a lot of the creative vitality that we see, that like William Gibson and I see these days, is not literary. I mean, we hang out with people like Berg in London, who are interface designers, you know, and the people who follow me on Twitter are not science fiction fans. Maybe 15 to 20% are science fiction readers or writers, and the rest, they're designers, or tech startup people, or just guys on Twitter, you know, for whatever reason. And that's not going to go away. You know, the fan mail that I get now is not about my novels. I get communications from people saying, will you come speak to us about digital video? Will you come keynote our digital video fest? Okay, I don't make digital video. I'm not a filmmaker. She is, you know, but I'm not. But people want me to be there just because they sense that I'm somebody who can help that event. You
You
know,
insult them. You said stupid video. That was a
you know,
nice
well,
speech
you
you
know,
gave. The stupid
I've been
video.
known to give angry speeches at events, but you know, people want me to be there, and they don't want me to go over there and write science fiction about digital video.
Sure.
That's not what they're asking. They're asking me to go there because they think people will go if I go.
Bruce, earlier in the day we spoke about some of your works being potentially good for filming,
Right?
and you said something about kiosk.
Yes.
And how it could be translated into Kazakh yurt or something like that.
Yes.
Could you tell us a few words about that particular work and how could relate to this territory, you know,
Right.
this land mass?
Well, you know, in order to talk about what you would do with film, you would have to talk about how film works, and especially you'd have to talk about science fiction cinema in countries like Kazakhstan. And there's a lot of it. I mean, there's like some very interesting Mexican science fiction cinema now, and interesting Bollywood science fiction cinema, but also like Korean science fiction cinema, and other things that are underestimated by people. Okay, these are low budget efforts. They're not going to be like making Spider-Man 3 in Los Angeles with $200 million and the full panoply of special effects. What you need to do to be successful in that situation is sort of capture the imagination of locals, while at the same time having some kind of universality. the way that this South African movie about the aliens in apartheid somehow speaks to people who've never been through apartheid, right? So, you were talking about things I could do. Okay, I've written many stories. Some of them would require very large budgets to film. This other film, which is, this other idea, which is Kiosk, it would have some special effects, but they would be pretty easy to fake. And I think, yes, to fake, because all special effects are fakes.
Sure.
And I think it might be,
Till you make it.
well, it just needs to work in the shot,
Yeah.
because it's a film.
Yeah.
And I think it might be possible to get some commercial and manufacturing tie-ins to go along with that, because in regional cinema those are very important. Unless you have a government grant, and those are dangerous in some ways because the government always wants it to be about the state, you're going to need somebody who's not in cinema, whose interest it is to see this thing exist. So I would suggest you would find some kind of high-tech manufacturer here and say, we're thinking about doing a science fiction movie all about high-tech manufacturing, and we'd like to call you guys in as sort of like our special effects and scientific consultants. I mean, they say if you want money, ask for advice, right? If you want advice, ask for money. But if you want money, ask for advice. Just say, look, we're like future-minded guys, and we think there ought to be some really interesting kind of, manufacturing here in Kazakhstan. Because we do all kinds of cool high-tech stuff, and nobody knows about it.
This is great.
So we want to do a movie which is like in a high-tech future where it's like full of cool high-tech Kazakhstan manufacturing, and then the hero's this guy, and he's like invented this breakthrough device that's like making this stuff that's like nothing else.
This is
Okay, well, it's not me who would do it, but somebody could do it. And the thing that would be interesting about it is that like these kinds of manufacturing are happening all over the world, right? So that's what would make it interesting. I mean, you would do a film which had a lot of special effects about strange manufactured, future designed objects, right? And it would help if they were not just Kazakhstani, but super Kazakhstan, right? Like sort of like medieval golden horde objects from the 12th century, but produced through super high-tech means, right? I mean, that's what would really capture the imagination. Not that they're like ahead, but that they're like in some other
the
unexpected.
spirit of Genghis Khan that gives you the right to rule the world.
I don't know,
Everybody
I've seen some
carries one around.
I've seen some awfully high-tech yurts. I mean, people really like this kind of mobile living. It'd be a super interesting establishing shot. You're coming across the prairie, the steppe. There's a yurt. There's some goats. You go inside there, and it's just like it's like a lab, right? It's just like this fantastic mobile laboratory in there. Everything is like biologically and solar powered. There's like bizarre objects. There's some guy in there is like has 3 degrees from MIT, and yet he somehow agreed to pursue this sort of bizarre.
And he's also a Bolshevik.
Yeah.
Hello, Bolshevik is over there.
Yeah, well, he'd have to be a good-looking male lead guy.
What about the
But
woman?
maybe female.
Well, there's a woman in that story.
Mila Jovovich.
I know. Oh, yeah. No, there was 2 women actually.
There actually are women in that particular story. Yeah.
Who's going to play it? That's the problem. We're already
Oh, you're casting it.
We're
She's casting it
for Harry
already.
Shea.
Who could do it?
Yeah.
But
Well-
definitely not George Clooney, yeah?
No,
no, George Clooney.
I mean, it's not about finding, really, in
We like
circumstances,
George, but some people don't.
in circumstances
actually.
like yours, it's not about finding a good story and turning it into a good movie. That's a naive way to think. It's about finding a means of production that can actually allow a movie of that kind to exist, and then finding
Yeah.
a section of society that will really want to watch it.
Thank you for this. This was very inspiring.
Okay, and it's got nothing to do with
I
me.
now have a role.
You'd be better
but
off doing it with
we
somebody
go
who
off
written
and we do
something.
it.
I mean, I'd be happy to help
Возможно,
you, but,
сегодня зародится
that's just
новый
how it
жанр
actually
степной
works.
киберпанк.
Anwar is just making the last comment before we go. He's saying that perhaps we witnessing the birth of the new genre, the step cyberpunk.
Yeah. Well, that happens everywhere I go. I mean, people call this story of kiosk Balkan punk.
Balkan Punk.
Balkan Punk, but it's only because I was living in the Balkans when I
Учитывая, что
anyway,
еще был конгресс
Thanks
фантастов.
to everyone, and see you
Right.
soon.
Yeah, if you're from Kazakhstan and you want to follow me on Twitter, I will allow you to do that.
Yeah, just
Unless
mention
you're a
that you-
search engine optimization guy,
The
in which case,
password is
forget it.
core.
Forget it.